Good morning and welcome to the October Chairs Breakfast. I want to remind everybody in the audience that this meeting is being broadcast and recorded. I just have a single sort of announcement to make, or maybe a compound one, and that is just to remind all the members of your committee that on November the 2nd, we will have our 5th annual training session here in the townhouse beginning at 9 o'clock for all members of all committees and boards in town. The session is going to have 3 components. The first that we always have is the town clerk will talk to us about open meeting law, open records law, our responsibilities to go online and go through the process for reviewing the ethics requirements. The second one is particularly germane to committees here in town. Carmen Reese, the town moderator, will present a session on town meeting, and the part of the town meeting that she'll be talking about is what are committee responsibilities at town meeting. And they sort of fall into 2 categories. One, if you have a warrant article, what do you do about that? And if you don't have a warrant article, but you've seen a warrant article or heard about a warrant article for which you have a point of view as a committee, what do you do? And then the third is I will run a session on sort of how to run a meeting and kind of issues that people have trouble with and things like that. We should be out maybe 11:45. There'll be refreshments in here. Speak of the moderator. Here she is.
Good morning.
Morning, ma'am. There'll be refreshments at 9 o'clock, and I think we're planning to start at 9:30. I was just going over our training session in November. So I hope you will encourage everybody to come. I think folks have found it pretty useful, particularly folks who have not been on committees before, so they understand. And particularly for those committees who do think they may have a warrant article or are going to have something to say. So we learn as early as possible what the warrant articles are. If some of them need to be cleared by council, we have a chance to get them to council and get them back and then get them scheduled. So that would be greatly appreciated. Also, just a continuing reminder that if you have vacancies on your committee, that please be in touch with your select board liaison representative so we can get that done. So without further ado, Madam Moderator, would you like to begin, or shall I go to Judge Crassley first?
Go to Judge Crassley.
Good
morning, Judge Crassley.
Well, I'm John Kratzley and the chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee. We met last night for our first of 3 meetings with applicants, individual sessions, about 4 each night with applicants. So we have a session last night. We have one on the 23rd and on the 29th to hear from each of the 13 applicants. That totals over $2 million in applications, and we still do not know from the state what our amount of available funding. I think it's the end of October. The state determines what will be allocated to each community for CPC distribution. So that's the process that we're in the midst of. We have received 2 important letters that are going to offer some useful guidance to the CPC. One is from the chair here about town priorities. There are probably maybe eight or 9 of the applicants are town projects, 4 or 5 are nonprofit applicants. So we have a letter from the select board giving priorities on the town projects as far as the votes that we might be taking, adjusting the requests and so on. It's useful to know those priorities from the point of view of the select board and the town manager. The second letter, and these documents are all posted on the website if anyone wants to read them. The second letter is from town council, offering some legal opinions about the two religious organizations that have applied for CPC grants. Most folks are probably aware there was significant litigation involving the town of Acton and grants to a particular religious group in Acton. So there's a rather complex guidance from the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts. And so this letter takes each of the applications through the tests that are in the three tests that are in the Supreme Court opinion. And so that letter, the guidance offered to the two religious organizations, obviously the guidance offered to the CPC for future voting, that's all now on the website. Questions?
When do you actually get down to your
Yeah.
vote?
Our review, we have two meetings in November to review all the recommendations, and essentially we begin internally as a group to adjust the numbers and make everybody from their different points of view, because there are select board representatives and there are town committee representatives. So we do that for 2 sessions in November. There's a public hearing on November 19th, when again, anyone who wishes to attend can weigh in on how they think these funds should be spent, on which projects, and then December 3rd is our vote.
Thanks, John.
'Cause we have to have a warrant article ready. It says your draft warrant articles due December 16th. How's that sound?
That sounds correct.
Okay.
May I ask whether the applicants on the religious entities are receiving any guidance from CPC on, at least so that they understand what the standards are?
Well, that's in town council's letter.
So you've shared that letter
Oh,
with
yes,
them?
yeah,
I see.
that letter was
Okay.
distributed to the applicants yesterday, to all the members of the CPC yesterday, and as I said, for anyone of this committee, of this group interested, they're all on our website now.
Okay.
May I ask?
Sure.
Yeah, since you took the trouble to mention it, I was just curious to know the names of the two religious organizations.
Sure. The Holy Family Parish and the First Parish in Concord.
My name is Greg Higgins. I'm the chair of the Natural Resources Commission. We're pretty standard fare. Seem to have a lot of septic systems being redone, which is good news, I think. We are full staff on the committee, and now we're full staff in town staff. Colleen, who's comes from Western Massachusetts, has joined us last week. I haven't met her yet. I'm going to meet her tonight's meeting, but we have a new assistant director replacing Lori Capone, and we're all set. So we should be getting back on some of the backlog work that staff does.
Yeah. We'll go around here and then we'll go
Okay.
to Emily.
All right. Our meeting is tonight, so I do not have too much to report. The EEE risk is still at moderate. Since our last meeting, I think most of the schools and public fields were sprayed. Since our last meeting, when we discussed Board of Health taking initiatives on banning or considering restricting sales further of e-cigarette and vaping devices, the governor nicely banned all devices for 4 months, but the Board of Health will still plan on taking some sort of action, thinking that there'll be some rollback of that. I have invited several people to tonight's meeting to weigh in and give us advice, and then we plan on holding public hearings at our November 18th and December 16th Board of Health meetings. So
Say the dates again.
I believe it's November 18th and December 16th Board of Health meetings will be public hearings.
Okay.
I'm Peter Nolan, Historic Chair of the Historic Districts Commission. I think there's nothing really coming up now that the library was granted a certificate of appropriateness for the main addition to the main library. So that certificate is apparently with town council now. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. And we continue to work with the museum to remedy a few issues that came up in that project with neighbors, but that seems to be going pretty well. Other than that, I would say it's pretty standard fare. We're fully staffed, so I think we're okay.
Great.
Matt Johnson with the Planning Board. First, about staff, we had been seeking a member for quite some time, and we think we found one. I think just pending you all's confirmation on the select board at your next meeting, we'll be fully staffed. Then we also recommended to the Zoning Board of Appeals that they approve a 4-unit planned residential development at Old Bedford Road, 430 Old Bedford Road. That one's been going around for a year and a half or so. It went from 8 units down to 7, down to 4. And then there is, we continue to be looking at this 36-unit development at 1440 Main Street. There's a tremendous amount of public interest there. Tentatively, the next meeting where that would be reviewed would be next Tuesday. I only say tentatively because there's still a few pending updates that the applicant hasn't made, and I don't know if they're going to want to proceed without them. Then, as far as our major initiatives for this year, the housing choice initiatives, we've reviewed the 2-family bylaw draft amendment. And then we had a very significant discussion at our last meeting about potential changes to the planned residential developments bylaw, especially given recent applicants, interpretations, let's say, of the clauses in there. And we haven't yet come to any conclusions. We're really concerned about, unintended consequences of some of the decisions. It's always nice to say, hey, open space needs to be this way, it needs to be upland, it needs to be, but when you have some lots that can be as small as an acre, and that sometimes that upland space is allowing you to put stuff in that you might not otherwise do, that we've seen in some other proposals, we want to be careful. Then we also will be bringing to town meeting a raft of new, amendments. I'm sorry, we're going to really be heavy this year. Hopefully, because in addition to these more significant ones like accessory dwelling units, we also have a number of things that we've discussed with the ZBA. For example, that the planning board would now be the approving body for hammerhead lots as opposed to the ZBA. Hopefully, many of those will go on the consent calendar, but I just wanted to give a heads up that numerically, there are going to be quite a few things coming from us this year.
And many of them, not quite, but housekeeping.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know if anybody will want to discuss that the ZBA would approve versus the planning board hammerhead lot application. I hope not, but who knows?
Find out.
Yeah. Then there's I think 5 of them, something like that. So then we also have gotten, I think, a nice addition to our process that's in process, which is we added sustainability criteria to our site plan reviews. And what we'd like to do now is to tighten that process up. We didn't really have any formal criteria. So thanks to Brian Folds, we got something from Durham, North Carolina that they use. And it's a very comprehensive kind of questionnaire for applicants about what they're doing on sustainability front. And so we could use that as a means to more objectively evaluate proposals. Our sustainability director of the town is looking at that, tailoring it more to Concord's needs. So we hope to formalize that. I don't think that would require any town meeting intervention. It's really just rules and regs relative to our site plan review. And I think that's about it. We're really hoping for Housing Choice to have a public meeting in November to kind of, air the proposals and get community feedback before we put something in the warrant. So we're really looking for a date where we can hold that. So
So I'd suggest you check with somebody in the town manager's office, Chris, probably,
okay,
with some proposed dates, and he can check the master calendar to try to give you some guidance as to where we minimize the conflicts.
yeah.
But I'd encourage you to get that on the calendar.
I figured that the 2229 Main Street one we kind of needed to get past, and
That's
then we could
coming up.
open up for the, yeah, right. Okay.
Good,
Thanks.
thank you. Carmen?
This is a quiet period. I have nothing to report.
Well done. So let's grab Wendy. Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning, sorry I was late. So I'm Wendy Ravelli, I'm the chair of the Concord Lake Board. So I think our biggest update was that last week on Thursday, we had a public meeting where we presented the long-term strategy for the plan. It was more an update for the public, and then we went into some detail on a key initiative that's upcoming around smart meters. And as we expected, there was a lot of input around smart meters. But let me just say, first, there was a lot of support for the strategy in general. People think we're on point and we're doing the right thing. As it relates to smart meters, obviously there's concern around the RFR EMF generation around smart meters. And so while there was support for it, there was the light plan is looking at different options around that. We have obviously a preferred solution, which is wireless, and we presented the business case behind smart meters. I think from citizen input, there's a preference for more of a wired solution, and obviously we have fiber in town, but to put 100% leverage those meters and link them to through fiber is going to be a very expensive option. Some citizens had presented a European model where that was the case. That vendor actually is not providing that solution in the United States. We did find one vendor who has sort of a hybrid approach, who does a little bit of everything. So we're looking into that. So we will be looking at the concerns that were raised around public health, safety, data security, et cetera, around the solution. And the board will sort of look at sort of our next steps from there. So a lot of information
Great.
gathered.
Good
I
attendance?
think. Yeah, no, good attendance. I think the room was pretty full. There was probably a good 50, 60 people. So
Excellent. If you haven't had a chance to go online and look at the strategic plan that the
Yep.
Life Let, they've been working on this for quite a while. It's very comprehensive.
Yep.
And it's, you'll recall that the town had an Energy Futures Task Force a few years ago as a result of a town meeting initiative. And the Life Plan has been working, in addition to smart meters, working very aggressively to get our carbon footprint, if you will,
Right.
down. And,
Yep.
and that's really coming along.
Yeah, no, it is. I think from 2018, we're about 54% carbon free at this point. Our goal is to do more, both through a combination of actually buying green energy, and as an interim step, we're also purchasing RECs, which allow us to sort of offset those carbon energies that we have. So that's our real long-term strategy. And the meters will give us certainly business efficiency, but also provide the ability to collect information around consumption and give that information back to consumers to help them understand their usage and provide opportunities to sort of change their behavior should they wish to. So a lot of good information collected. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Emily.
I'm Emily Wheeler. I'm a member of the Agriculture Committee. I'm sitting in for Happy Gopher chair. About a month ago, we had the 14th annual Ag Day Farmers Market on Main Street. Ag Day was conceived by the Ag Committee when it was first established by the Select Board as a showcase of Concord farming. We have a marvelous density of farms and farm businesses in the town. Last September 14th, about 10 I think, Concord farms represented on the street, one nonprofit farm gaining ground, and a wonderful array of Concord nonprofit groups interested in land conservation, sustainability, municipal governance. So for many years now, the Select Board has been represented on the street. joined this past year with the sustainability director and the town clerk. So I think it went well. We had rain towards the end, but not till towards the end. The Ag Day celebration of food production in Concord continued in the afternoon. The Garden Club sponsors tours of home kitchen gardens. So we not only have farm businesses, but we also have a lot of residents interested in growing their own food and showing how they do it. Farm tour at Hutchins Farm on Sunday, and then the following week Stone Soup Dinner, which is a long-standing fundraiser for agricultural products, publicity, grants, land conservation in town. Just one other thing. As a committee, we can't help but be concerned about Millbrook Farm and the impact on Millbrook by the construction on Cambridge Turnpike. I think that just seeing Sean Gerleo out on Elm Street near Paparazzi is, you know, good on him, good on them for finding ways to continue to be in business and thrive in business during the construction. But I think it's been awfully hard. And we don't know, since we're here, could we ask how long is this project expected to go?
I don't know exactly, but a while. I mean, but they've gotten paving in and the intersection up toward us, that's pretty well in place, and the same on the other side. The big part of the project is raising the road that goes over the wetland, and that is the complicated part of what they're doing. So I don't know the answer, but it's going to continue for a while, and I'll get that for you.
There was an update published by the DPW on
Yeah.
that. That's on the website, actually. It came out about a month ago, I think.
I think a month
Time
or close
flies
to
by.
5 weeks
Yeah.
ago,
Yeah, yeah. It might help.
So, yep. All right, so can we go in the back and grab John and Jean, then we'll come back up, David, and come around. So, John?
So I'm John Hickling, and I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I didn't come bearing any official message from our chair.
Well, you could tell us what your committee is up to these
The
days.
guideline process is going along tickety-boo. We finished the Minuteman and the town manager's guideline requests, and those were all done with great satisfaction. Next Thursday is the heavy lifting of, the school and the administration. So we're, as you'd expect, we're ahead of schedule and on budget. Tonight we decided, based on our workload, that we didn't need to have a meeting so that we could prepare really for next Thursday, the school meetings.
So next Thursday meeting tomorrow or a week?
A week. Tomorrow's meeting, we've decided, a regular FinCom meeting is decided is not necessary.
Oh.
So a week from tomorrow, we'll meet with the school.
Not excellent. Don't have to go to a meeting.
Yeah, you have tonight off.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Jean?
Hi, Jean Goldsberry from the Commission on Disabilities. And we have been trying to connect with the library committee to talk about the handicap parking at the library. We're not completely comfortable with the solution that the library has, but we have some ideas. So they will be coming to our meeting on the 24th. We had a lovely presentation from the StarMat group at our last meeting. We have not taken any official action concerning the recommendations, but some of us are planning to go to the public meeting that's going to be held, I think, next week.
No,
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow, okay.
And just
Tomorrow
since you
is-
mentioned it, Jean, there are two public hearings tomorrow, one at 5, both in the hearing room. One at 5 o'clock and the second at 1:05 to 6:45 and 7 to 8, something like that, in the hearing. You're gonna tell us more details.
I will, yeah. And we had a display in the Concord bookstore a week ago honoring Disability Awareness Month, which is in October. And we also have been in touch with the state's emergency preparedness
trainer for people with disabilities, and we're trying to work out a time probably in December for him to come here in Concord and do a presentation on emergency preparedness for people with disabilities, and that then will be open to the public.
David?
Okay, so tax fairness, sorry, David Carr, Chair of the Tax Fairness Committee. And we are, I guess, in the long end game of the of renewing the senior means test exemption. We have our proposal, and it's now a matter of going through the long process of getting it before the town meeting and the legislature and back to town meeting to polls. And other than that, we're not sure what we do next.
Okay, so again, just quickly, it had some administrative changes to make to it and to the tax relief process, and also then eliminated the sunset clause. So
Right. That's the major thing. We do not want to do this every 3 years. It's too much.
I'm Pam Rockwell from.
Actually, just before you start, PMK, does the Tax Fairness Committee plan to hold any kind of a public hearing on its own before you get into the town meeting process?
I think we hadn't planned that. We had planned to present during the usual town meeting hearing cycle. I don't know if we should have. If we hold a meeting earlier, we could do that.
Yeah, the only real change was some small administrative changes to it. But the big one is simply to eliminate the sunset clause.
Yeah, and there's a couple of minor changes. Some of the applicants might get a few more dollars than they did before, but it's
Right.
nothing major.
I think, I would guess that mostly people are just going to want to know how it's gone. You know, how much money has been given out, how many people have been benefited, what does it cost the town overall, just so that they can assess the reasonableness and effectiveness of the program, because that's really going to be the basis of people's votes, I would think.
Well, the punchline, David and his committee, along with the assessor, came to the select board meeting
It was
a few weeks ago.
23rd.
They've used, you'll recall that you could allocate up to 0.5% of tax revenue to this. They're using about a quarter.
Yeah, a little less than a quarter for 49 grant applications granted.
Right.
Nowhere near the cap, and even if they had approached the cap, you might recall that the warrant article and the law permits the select board to act to increase the cap up to, I think, 1%, right? Is that
1%.
1%. So we're nowhere near even the existing cap.
Yeah. So, is there a summary of kind of that presentation on your website, on your page on the website?
No, I don't think so yet.
Might be enough to put it there,
Yeah.
and then if people are curious, they can go check. And then other than that, I guess I'm inclined to agree that the ordinary hearing process for town meeting is just fine for that exercise.
Good, thank you. Pam?
I'm Pam Rockwell from I'm the chairman of the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee, and I'm also on the NMI Starmont Reuse Planning Committee, and I'm filling in for Gary Kleinman, who's the committee chair there. The Reuse Committee is hosting a forum tomorrow night. There's a 5 o'clock version and a 7 o'clock version. They're the same thing happening twice in a row, that it's not something you want to come to both of. But we really want to encourage people. This is like the planning sessions for the long range plan, to get ideas from people and to get them thinking about what's going on at this site. There's going to be almost 25 acres of buildable area at this site potentially. It's pretty rare that Concord has that much space available at once to think about putting a building there from scratch that doesn't necessarily, or putting facilities there from scratch that don't necessarily have requirements on them based on, a school funding or whatever. There's possibilities for recreation, an indoor track, a community center. I've heard ideas of moving the Council on Aging there and then being able to use Harvey Wheeler for some other purposes, and that that was there, a transportation hub where Cross Connect could go from Acton and Maynard to the train station, satellite parking there. This site is going to be cleaned up enough to have residents there. I want to encourage everybody to think about the things you don't think about because you didn't have this space available. For instance, this is a place where you could put seasonal worker housing. For instance, there could be, we could put a building that theoretically might be big enough to actually house all of town meeting in one space, or we might be able to put a space that could do real serious emergency shelter activities, which are harder to do at Harvey Wheeler or at the high school, as part of having these things be this facility or this space be another purpose most of the time. Where you think about that from the beginning, and think about the constituencies that aren't on committees that need to get out to think, what can I do there? Because this really is a great opportunity. From my other committee's point of view too, the big news is that the consent decree was signed by the Justice Department and is now on file. And so we're in a 30-day comment window. We're going to be commenting about that. Most of the people that I know that have looked at it say it looks as expected, that indeed the entire cleanup as it was set up in the record of decision has been funded, and the scope of work that they are proposing looks very good, and that the funding is appropriately done for the cleanup according to the legal parts, which I don't really know too much about. But the reason that's important is because we're now on basically a 19-month countdown to think about how we would want some kinds of site preparation or things like that built into the remedial design, because they're going to have to find fill for some of the areas that they have. They can do site preparation for us, taking fill from one area of this site to use it to fill in the holding basin and in places where they remove soils as part of their cleanup. They're going to have to put, they're going to have to move heavy equipment in, and they're going to probably pave access roads for that. We're going to have to put power lines in to work and various facilities. If we know where we want those things, then they get built into the system. If we know we want to park vehicles on top of the old holding basin once it's done, then they will be sure that it's compacted heavily enough that we can put a dump truck there without damaging the cleanup cap below. Things like putting batteries in so that we can have more accessibility for solar panels and use that. This is right across the street right across the river from the Gray site. It's right near Forest Ridge Road where the Concord Municipal Light Plant is. So there are a lot of things there that we could get, and we don't have to make a commitment. We can say, well, this is where we think we're going to want these things, so that they will build that into their remedy. And if we don't want to use things exactly like we plan them, that's not going to make that big a difference. But it makes a difference whether we end up with a grassy field with a lot of trees on it, because that's the only guidance we've given them before they do their cleanup. So we want to think about this.
It's important for us to do this committee, but it's also important not to get too locked in because while it's still quite a ways away before we're going to be able to do anything. Are you working with the town manager to make sure we have, on behalf of the committee, appropriately responded during this period?
Marcia and Gary have been working with the town
That's fine,
manager
right?
about that, I believe. So I think so.
Well, it's good progress. It was good news when we heard it, I think, a week ago, right, that we heard it.
It was just a few days ago. It's been really quick. I was really surprised. I was expecting they were going to think that we should make more plans before they would sign the consent decree, but they went ahead and did it. So we now want to.
Any word on any of the liens against the property?
I don't know how that works out. I haven't worked with town council on that. Gary's been working somewhat on that, but I don't think we don't have to settle that to make a decision about. All we have to do is say this. We don't have to actually take the property in order to talk about it. We have to say, if we take the property, this is what we're going to do with it. So try to arrange that when you.
No, but just one of the steps down the road is for the town to become the owner of the property,
Right.
and that's related to
Yes.
potential liens against the property. Great, Pam.
And on that note, my 2229 committee is looking for more people. We need another, Judy's been our natural resources commission person, and we could use another person because she was interested in moving on. She's been really overworked with the planning because she was on the long range plan as well. And we have 2 other openings. We could use environmental engineers, hydrologists, and we could also use a lawyer. Because we don't have a lawyer on the committee right now. Our lawyer got called up by the Navy and is in Washington. So he's going to be serving for a year and a half. So.
That's great.
I'm Carlin Reed. I'm a member of the PEG Access Advisory Committee, and I'm sitting in for the chair, Scott Hopkinson. Last meeting, we approved a report by the committee on the results of the PEG survey that we took earlier this year, and we'll be presenting that report to the select board at, I believe it's the November 18 meeting. It's your second November meeting, a short presentation there. And then coming up on this next meeting we have, we've invited our cable TV provider, Comcast representative, to come talk to us, which we do twice a year, about issues here in town and about what we see happening along the cable TV pathway. So we are fully staffed, and we meet at the studio.
Right, thank you.
I'm Paul Cook. I'm the chair of the cemetery committee. We have a new superintendent, Aaron McCloskey, who is also acting superintendent of buildings and roads. Dan Rowley went to Shrewsbury, so his assistant has become the acting superintendent of buildings and roads, which means he's automatically the acting superintendent of the cemetery. And we also are now fully staffed. Mr. Brian Davidson joined the committee so that we now have 5 members. We've just dedicated $12,000 a year, which is not much, for the restoration of damaged old headstones. The Friends of Sleepy Hollow have just completed a project cleaning headstones, very old ones. Mr. Leo Carroll is the committee member who is the liaison between our committee and the Friends of Sleepy Hollow, which is a private organization that seeks to beautify and preserve the old cemetery. And we are reviewing specifications for rules for mausoleums, and then to have a rate hearing once that's done, to put 5 new mausoleum sites on sale at the old part of Concord Cemetery. There's only one there now. It was put there in 1930, the Pope tomb. And we are planning to, we had a public meeting last year, to put 5 new mausoleum sites on sale. These will be very expensive sites, the funds for which will be very helpful for preservation and restoration of things like stone walls and tombstones in Sleepy Hollow.
Isn't there a waiting list that exists?
There's a waiting list for spots in the cemetery, but not for mausoleum sites, because no one had, three and a half years ago, someone came to us and said, I'd like to buy a mausoleum site right there with the Pope tomb, next to the Pope tomb. And we said, Tish Hopkins said, no one's out, she's been here since 1987, no one's ever asked her that question before.
Well,
So
because my question was aimed at, would these folks who are on the waiting list,
They have
maybe usurped by?
No, that, the thing is that a spot in the cemetery would probably cost at the most $2,000. A mausoleum site would cost $200,000. And so most of those folks are not going to be interested in buying one, but they will all have, I guess, first right of refusal for a mausoleum
Exactly my
site.
point. Something that would have cost $2,000 is now going to be.
Those sites could not be used for a grave. They're on a hillside. Just like the Pope tomb, if you're familiar, it's right next to the Melvin Memorial.
Up by the memorial.
And so they couldn't be used for anything except in order, yeah, and in order to put a grave on that hillside, you'd have to build a mausoleum. So it's just sites that were, I think it was originally planned to use, but no one has made a noise about it since 1930.
Right, interesting.
How many people do you bury in a mausoleum?
Well, currently, 65% of the interments are cremations in our cemetery, which it seems to be more and more everywhere. People are being cremated. So I think something like 115 a year, and of those, 65% are cremations, and many of those are going in the new part, which is down further towards Bedford. There are absolutely only a very few sites. In fact, it's completely sold out in the old part. But if someone sells a spot back to us, then we talk to someone who's on the waiting list, and they have first right of refusal to take such a site. Most of the new burials are down towards.
Right.
Bedford.
But when you buy your mausoleum, how many bodies would go into a mausoleum?
The Pope tomb has room for 4. These would be family mausoleums. Many cemeteries have them, Mount Auburn, but we've only got 1. We have room for a few more. And we had a public hearing about that last year. There was a lot of interest in that, and also in a what they call what the name escapes me, a kind of niche wall for cremation remains. Rather than putting them in the ground, you would put them in a little building with a niche. Each niche would be probably the most economically efficient way to buy the grave site.
Good.
Hi. Good morning. Sorry I'm late. Yannis Tsintsis from Concord Housing Development Corporation, and I'm here to report on 2 projects that we are currently working on. The first one is we are working with Habitat for Humanity on finalizing the land development agreement that will enable CHDC to transfer title to Habitat, at which point they will begin to permit and develop the property as a two-family affordable duplex occupancy. Is expected to happen by somewhere in 2021. And the second is we're also working with the developer on the Jackson Village project on the preparation to finalize their application for affordable housing income tax credits, and the funding is expected in 2020. So.
We have an updated select board from Liz Russ and from Walter O'Hanian on the Junction Village process that will be applying for tax credits during this next go around. Our expectation is this year they will, next year they will actually receive them, and we'll move ahead with that project going for building permits. So with some luck, maybe that'll actually happen.
Yeah, we're hoping. That's what we discussed in the last meeting, and Liz said that, it looks by 2020, we expect the tax credit, by August, the tax credit to come in, and hopefully then we can start working.
There was Pam's remarks reminded me of one thing that I did not report, and that is that I made a request as Concord's town moderator to the middle school building committee that in the feasibility study, the committee think about the use of the building for community meeting spaces. That was not a consideration that was part of the design of the high school. And that's for a variety of reasons. One was the MSBA requirements. Another is the fact that it's part of a region, and Carlisle had no interest in incorporating into the project mechanisms for Concord to have public meetings in the building. The middle school affords potentially an opportunity for us to have an auditorium that isn't at a 45-degree pitch, and better handicapped access, a cafeteria where you could close the doors, all kinds of things potentially could happen. It would all be a matter of cost and whether it made sense as part of the project, but now was certainly the time to raise that issue. We spent a lot of money renting crap in order to make the high school work for us as a meeting space, and it would be wonderful if we had a space that didn't require us to rent so much, and where I wouldn't hear, as I do every year, I don't understand why we spent $90 million on a school and we're not sitting in the comfortable seats in the auditorium. So just thought I'd report that.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Well, I'll thank you all very much for coming, and we'll see you at the November meeting.
Thank you.
I had